Hello, and welcome everybody to another Sacred Wisdom podcast. In this podcast today, we are going to discuss the Hollow Earth stories, and we're going to start by talking about the American Indians, but also go on to someone who is very fascinating, and that is Steve Curry, who was going to do an expedition back in 2003 to the Hollow Earth, which is quite an incredible story. And I am joined with my amazing brother as always. Hello, Stephen. How you doing?
Hello, Zach. I'm doing very well, and I hope all's good with you.
Very good, my brother. All is well. Look, first and foremost, let's go into the American Indian stories because there is so much folklore and tales of these caverns within the earth that the American Indians speak about. So let's just talk about some of the tribes and their stories within their tales of the American Indians.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different tales for Native American folklore in regard to the Hollow Earth, in regards to the white giants of North America, and obviously what they described in their own Native American languages as the luminous tunnels, the luminous caverns that led down into the radiances of the golden palaces that shimmer within the Hollow Earth, that are obviously resonating beyond space-time and therefore are, shall we say, semi-translucent or aren't particularly visible and so I'm going to really just focus on two Pacific Native American tribes because they share a very Pacific account of the Hollow Earth when it comes to connecting that phenomena, what we now know is unidentified flying objects or UFOs. And these are the Navajo Indians and the Paiute Indians in the United States of America. Now, they have a very interesting perception in their own American Indian folklore in reference to or in regards to the Hollow Earth and the dwellers of the subterranean reaches that has been given many names in world mythology and world folklore. To try and simplify it right down, the Navajo Indians and the Paiute Indians have many accounts of flying discs, shall we say, or flickering, shimmering in the bright, direct sunlight in the midday, and also glowing like iridescent discs of spectral color or hues in the night skies over their teepees and so forth, their settlements. And I really would like to just briefly describe what the Navajo Indians and the Paiute Indians actually described these flying discs that they perceived had emerged from the Hollow Earth deep beneath the North American continent. So we have the first of these, which is the Nitsa Beesh Lige Chidanate, which means great silver airships, according to the Navajo Indians and the Paiute Indians, which they also called the Nitsa Kosi Chidanate, the great cloud airships, and the Nitsa Adinaniden Chidanate, which means great light airships. And finally, these Native American Indians referred to these airborne vessels as the Nitsa Nazbas Chidanate, the great
Oh,
round airships. So these Navajo Indians and these Paiute Indians obviously were being frequented by visitations from these airborne vessels from the Hollow Earth that were piloted by inhabitants or residents from these subterranean reaches. And this is going back a very long period into history. And actually, one of the accounts actually in the English language states that if we take, shall we say, contemporary chronological dating, it goes back some point to 10,695 BC. So
wow.
this is
And how
obviously
was
going,
that documented? Was that through petroglyphs on the walls and stuff like that?
yeah, I think it's to do with petroglyphs that were found and accounts given by Pacific Navajo Indians and Paiute Indians. So we're going back to the Upper Paleolithic. This is long before white European settlers obviously colonialized the United States of America and Canada. And these Navajo Indians and Paiute Indians, like so many of the other Native American tribes, I mean, we can think of the stories that have come from the Mohican, that have come from the Algonquin, that have come from the
Hopi.
Comanche,
I
yeah,
mean,
the Hopi Pueblo, the Zuni Pueblo Indians. The list just goes on and on and on. It's
mm,
so many different American Indian tribes that have got accounts that connect various various aspects of Hollow Earth folklore to UFOs or flying discs. So
Mm.
therefore we can sort of posit this as a question, and that is the Navajo Indians and these Paiute Indians were obviously giving accounts of what they saw was perhaps the origin of so many of the UFOs or flying discs, which is obviously from the Hollow Earth. So were these flying discs flying out of the opening in the Arctic North Polar region, or were they flying, coming out of the actual opening at the Antarctic South Polar region and flying over the North American continent? Again, that's open to question. It may be the case there's vast geological openings into cavernous reaches and subterranean expanses in the Appalachian Mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, and so forth in the United States of America, as well as other high altitude locations where perhaps there are covert geological openings where these UFOs or flying discs are emerging from and flying back into.
The Hopi Indians believed in the Hollow Earth, and I know we spoke
That's
about it
right.
in the book about the Anunnaki and the ant people and all this, but it's interesting how their story centered around what was called Tor, the sun spirit, and Tora is the creator, one of the Hopi deities,
That's right.
and it was formed of the first world out of Tokpela or endless space, as well as the other original inhabitants. But according to Hopi legend, when time and space began, the sun spirit Tor created the first world in which insect-like creatures lived unhappily in caves.
That's
And
right.
I find that really interesting because that's the kind of whole birth of the Hollow Earth, isn't it? It's how it kind
With
of
the,
where it's kind of stem come from. Yeah, come from.
if you look at the actual, yeah, if you look at the actual Hopi Pueblo folklore in regard to what we can call the ant people or the insect people
Yeah.
in shall we say modern UFO folklore, especially in the United States of America, and obviously we've discussed at length the Greada Treaty that was signed around the 20th of February 1954 at Murakami Airfield, which became Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County in Southern California, with what appeared to be these Orion Greys or Rigelian Greys or tall Greys and their genetic drones or servants. These are the Zeta Reticulans type A Greys and the Zeta Reticulans type B Greys. These different extraterrestrials, who are a lot of them highly malevolent, are known to have existed in prehistoric times,
Mm.
within cavernous reaches deep below the surface of the North American continent. So that's interesting, which means there would have been encounters between, I would say, the Navajo Indians, the Paiute Indians, the Hopi Indians, the Zuni Indians, and so on, and many other Native American tribes with these ant people, insect people, or Zeta Reticulan type A Greys, Zeta Reticulan type B Greys. So there's obviously a long-standing connection between the surface dwellers, in this case being the Native Americans, and obviously the subterranean dwellers, in this case being these malevolent types of extraterrestrials, and connections to the Hollow Earth, which I find very interesting.
It is incredible. And do you think the stone carvings of the Hopis, that obviously we're not talking about the Hopi specifically, but just on that note, all the petroglyphs and all the carvings, do you think they're very similar to the Ica stones as well? There's a
Yeah, there's a
similar
lot of
pattern.
similarities in correlations to the Ica region in Western Peru and South America. And there's even in the three-dimensional sense to do with the Acambaro figures of
Yeah.
central Mexico. If
Mm,
you were to then put those into a 2D format, into a Native American petroglyphs,
mm.
there is similarities to do with the contours and the outlines of the diagrammatics that are portrayed or pictorialized. So I would say there's definitely connections there on some much more distant level, going back to the Upper Paleolithic. And obviously, we're not going to hear anything from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. regarding any of this. As we've discussed and mentioned so many times in previous Sacred Wisdom podcasts, a lot of this information to Western science is irrelevant. They won't touch it,
Mm.
and it's like, if and it is related in this sense. If we bring up the subject of Great Tataria, many individuals will toe the line of Western science, will ignore the actual documented evidence, and will refer to people like me and yourself as shills or disinformers for supplying valid and credible information in regards to Great Tartaria, as with many other anomalous historical subjects that aren't questioned, aren't looked at, aren't academically taken seriously by Western science. The same with the Native American mythology, Native American folklore in regards to extraterrestrials, in regards to UFOs and flying discs. And obviously, the whole idea of a hollow earth theory, this concept that below the surface of planet Earth are vast cavernous regions of luminous caverns, luminous tunnels that lead down into some incredible hollow earth, a golden paradise. That so many of the stories from Native American cultures actually discuss in great detail. And there was once a very interesting interrelationship between Native American shamanism and the Hollow Earth, as well as what you can call as the celestial deities or the sky gods that came down from the solar system on numerous occasions to meet and converse with the chieftains of not just the Navajo Indians, the Paiute Indians, the Hopi Indians, the Zuni Indians, and so on, but so many other tribes across the North American continent, and all of which that the majority of white European settlers from countries like the United Kingdom of Great Britain, or from France or Belgium, or the Netherlands, or from Germany and so forth in Western Europe, just completely ignored, didn't bother to translate those languages, didn't bother to make any historical or anthropological effort to really to know more about the actual incredibly long-term history of so many of these Native American tribes and their connections to the cosmic heavens above and the hollow earth. Everything is just dismissed out of hand, is more information from shills, disinformation of no relevance, and it's just all sidelined as is stories and high conjecture, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's a lot of stories once you start looking into all this. So moving on to stories of these tribes, have they had any tells or Pacific, from any of the chiefs of the tribes or anything like that? That's information that relays some of these Hollow Earth stories, because I don't want to go off the point, but what we just speaking about a minute ago with the symbols. Do you think they were almost ways to access these points, access these dimensional gateways, or possibly, or vortexes, whatever it is, to get into the Hollow Earth? There's a connection, because all these petroglyphs and stuff, they're always seen in caves.
That's right.
They're always seen within the Earth. So I'm just seeing if there's a connection between them two.
I think there is angiomagnetic ley lines intersecting nodes or vortices. And I believe the Hollow Earth is a type of resonant sort of golden paradise that really vibrates beyond linear space-time. I think it would be...
Can you just explain, when you say beyond space-time, relay that to the audience so they understand?
Shall we say, the more condensed frequencies and vibrations of what we define as the 3D holographic reality of this material dimension, where everything seems so condensed, so tangible, so authentic, so solidified.
Yeah,
I think everything's a lot more, shall we say, a lot more radiant, a lot more lucid within the Hollow Earth. I think it touches on the etheric vibrations that are edging towards the electromagnetic threshold that goes into the 4D holographic reality of the astral plane, and therefore the laws of physics, the laws of gravity, therefore, don't exactly apply to much of what is going on inside planet Earth. And again, this is seen as me just positing a concept or an idea that cannot be proven, not at this time. But we're going on, in this sense, in this Sacred Wisdom podcast, we're really going on Native American mythology and Native American folklore.
With the Sasquatches, the stories of the American Indians spoke about Sasquatches, where they would get dropped off by these illuminated flying shields.
That's right. We've mentioned that before in a previous Sacred Wisdom podcast. But when we look across numerous locations such as southwestern Colorado, southeastern Utah, northeastern Arizona, and northwestern New Mexico, which are geographic locations that are historically very connected to the habitations of the Navajo Indians. They referred to elusive humanoids that would emerge in the nighttime and sometimes in the daytime from flying discs that I mentioned earlier in this Sacred Wisdom podcast. They were described as the Have Masuzi, and this means shining wisdom people. And
Wow.
some of the time, the Navajo Indians would actually refer to them as the Joho Nachiel Anasazi, meaning shining light, ancient people. So we
Wow.
have that word Anasazi, the
Mm.
connection to the Anasazi Indians that go back into possibly the antediluvian period. That's before the first Great Flood and the second Great Flood, that were worldwide events that are again recorded not
Is
just in
is
Native
the Anu
American
on the front any
mythology and
connect?
folklore.
Is the Anu on the front anything connected to the ant? You know, like in the sense of the Anu in the ant people.
But there's connections that are made in Native American petroglyphs between these different aspects.
Mm.
Again, but again, not given enough credible academic research, enough time and effort is being made to really find these connections in terms of comparative historical understanding or discernment of Native American mythology and Native American folklore when it comes to the Hollow Earth, to extraterrestrials who were perceived, I said a bit earlier on, as these celestial deities, the sky gods from the solar system, and obviously the Hollow Earth and the various types of life forms that exist there and have existed there for numerous aeons of time, far beyond the time period of the modern age that we've
Mm.
been given, you know, when it comes to studying different events in the last 300, 400, 500, 600 years, going back, I'd say, to the early medieval period. So what we're looking at is connections between various types of inhabitants, communities of inhabitants in the Hollow Earth, and the Native Americans, such as the Navajo Indians. We have to remember that the Paiute Indians follow very much in what happened with the Navajo Indians. So when
Mm.
it comes to looking at the geographic locations, and these are vast tracts of the United States of America that the various Paiute Indians were in existence in. So the northern Paiute were from northeastern California, northwestern Nevada, eastern Oregon, and southern Idaho. And they
Right.
had these accounts of these shining beings, these light beings, for want of a better phrase, that seemed to emerge from flying discs or the hollow earth, and would converse with their chieftains, would had a great fascination with their Native American shamanism, their connection as the first ecologists on the North American continent to do with the various ecosystems and the birds and the mammals and so on, and the trees and the plants around them and the mountains and the rivers. And so we can see these connections again with the southern Paiute of northern Arizona, southern Nevada, and southwestern Utah, and the Owens Valley Paiute or eastern Mono Paiute, and the western Mono Paiute or the Monache of eastern central California. Again,
Right.
they've got these numerous stories or accounts of these shining beings or light beings. And I'm not going to be giving Pacific language translations for all of these because it's very in depth, it's very intricate.
Is there anywhere people can find that information out?
You just need to go and find any information to do with the Hollow Earth, Native American tribes, do the internet searches. You have to kind of make a bit of effort going back to books that were published during the Victorian age. Yeah, and you know, you can also go and look at the actual different online dictionaries that can be used when you actually read these stories or accounts for Native American mythology or Native American folklore, where you realize there's a lot of archetypal symbolism
Mm.
being used in those stories. And again, if you can decipher that in an objective way and
Mm.
understand what people were seeing, you know, how they describe things, you know,
Mm.
as we mentioned when it came to the Ica stones, the Spanish conquistadors and these Jesuit priests and Catholic missionaries wouldn't have looked at those Ica stones across the Ica region of Western Peru and South America and said, "Oh, they're dinosaurs."
No, of
They would have
course.
seen them as wingless dragons or
Yeah.
serpents that were ginormous behemoths, you know, these monstrous lizards, these terrifying, enormous reptiles that would have obviously been seen in scale in these Ica stones to the various Peruvian Indians that are carved onto them as well.
I
So that's
think that,
interesting.
no, and I think that we got to remember they didn't. Oh, well, I mean, maybe they did, with the advancement of technology, but they didn't have recording devices, so they couldn't have recorded their voices and said, "Oh, I'm documenting that." I think the
Yeah,
way
that's right.
these tribes did it was to document it through carving into the stone. They actually
They wanted a
documented
permanent, recorded,
exactly.
visual imprint of what they'd seen because it
Yeah,
had such an effect on them psychologically that
of
they felt
course.
they had to impress that with these Native American petroglyphs
And
that
they
would survive the weathering, weathering that goes on, the climate change and the sunlight and harsh winters and so on. So these would still be there hundreds of years later for
mm,
other, Homo sapiens or human beings, perhaps other Native Americans to discover. Obviously, a lot of them were discovered by white European settlers at the time. A lot of it wasn't taken seriously. We have to remember, if you look at the Ohio River Valley area, which is a huge expanse in the
massive.
United States of America, there were hundreds of these Indian mounds or serpent mounds constructed on geomagnetic ley lines that were found to contain the skeletal remains or whole skeletons of these white giants, and many of which were described as being at 10 feet to 12 feet in height when they
Wow.
actually excavated these skeletons out of these Indian mounds or serpent mounds. But what did most of the white European settlers do? They demolished and cleared all these various Indian mounds and serpent mounds, same as the what we know from the Montauk Indians of Long Island
Yeah.
in the United States of America, where
Mm,
it's purported that there were at least three large pyramids that had been constructed in Long Island in New York State in the eastern United States.
mm.
And these had quartz capstones, but when white European settlers from countries such as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany,
Smash
and so
them down.
forth, they were immediately demolished, and the rubble was repurposed, the quartz capstones were smashed, and what was done with those I have no idea. But it's like there's this constant erasing of the history of these different Native Americans, whether it's
Mm.
their connections to the Lemurian continent that existed in the Pacific Ocean, the civilization of Atlantis that had existed, or to do with the Hollow Earth or the celestial deities or the sky gods that had traveled through our solar system to get to planet Earth. All of these things are just completely dismissed. The skeletons of the white giants that were the first inhabitants, the initial inhabitants of the United States of America and Canada,
Yeah.
and the little people that the Cherokee Indians talk about, the Algonquin
It's massive.
Indians discuss as well. And
But
the
just
list just goes on and on and on. And
but
all of
Greek,
it is classed as irrelevant.
yeah, no, and always it's just as you're saying, it's just sidelined and it's dismissed, and we have to take note. There are so many of these petroglyphs over America, and they're still
Yeah.
discovering more. So on a constant basis, but
So
obviously, of
many of those Native American petroglyphs are still buried under alluvial
course,
soil, gravel, and sand, and there's not the funds in place with, the different, whether it's Stanford University or Harvard University in the United States of America, to
mm,
then go out and do the field archaeological research or excavations in different areas outside the norm of those various excavations that have been done in Pacific geographic locations for the last 40, 50 years that
mm,
then fit the narrative that Western science wants to keep repeating and putting out there to the general public about, the history of the United States of America and Canada, as with world history, a lot of which is very distorted.
mm,
And it's incredible how there seems to be almost a point that's being reached with Western science. There's so many of the different branches of Western science, the specialized academic researches that are taking place are just looping. There isn't any really significant breakthroughs or profound discoveries going
no, it's
on.
just going on and on.
It's just it's very small. I mean,
And they've made the idea of, obviously the big one is the theory of evolution. As we keep saying, it is completely a theory
yeah,
and
it's
it's
not a
never been
scientific law.
proven. So, but even when you tell somebody that who believes
Yeah,
in that, they like, well, it's kind of, I do understand that we go with the majority. So if there's an idea collectively and it's working collectively, that we work with it. So, but as you said, the whole dismissing of these incredible subjects that are vast in information,
yeah,
and that just coming into a bit of Greek folklore. So with the Greek folklore side, I mean, there is again countless stories of the
There
underground.
is.
Obviously, the big one is Tartarus as well, the
Yeah,
underground, which all connects to the Hollow Earth and all
yeah,
this. And
that's right.
how that is
Yeah.
interlinked exactly, we don't know, but it's there. You know, it's in there, that old
Well,
history.
Tartarus was obviously connected to Hades,
Yeah,
and obviously the subterranean reaches of Hades was named after the actual brother of Zeus Olymbos, Hades Olymbos. He was the underworld deity,
yeah,
of Greek mythology and Greek folklore. So there's obviously an association perhaps with the Middle Earth
yeah.
area where I believe there is the flow of magma and lava and a subterranean tectonic movement. There are
Yeah.
pockets or openings of cavernous geological entrances that go down into, large and undulating internecine passageways that do eventually lead into a vast opening that
Mm.
we would define as the Hollow Earth. And I do believe there is some kind of gaseous plasmic uh, ball of energetic frequencies that is there that we can possibly define as the inner sun or the Hollow Earth sun, the central sun of the Golden Paradise. Again, the
Do you
laws of
think that
physics
emits
may
a
not
lot?
apply in the sense that we would be used to because of the
Mm.
indoctrination we've all had from Western science when it comes to understanding, subatomic particles or quantum level, matter in this 3D holographic reality that we define as the material dimension.
Yeah, then maybe we're only meant to find out little parts. It could be too overwhelming
I think
to
it could be.
actually
Yeah,
think.
I agree.
I've just literally thought, then my brain started exploding, thinking, well, if there wasn't a moon and we didn't have dark and light, how much that would actually kind of start disrupting. Imagine living in a world of 24 hours of light, and that
Yeah.
is what it would be like in the inner Earth.
Mm.
The interesting thing is obviously people can't get their head around is the idea that the inner sun. So this concept that you're right about saying it's like more like a plasma ball. I believe that. I don't feel it is this hot molten lava,
No,
of heat.
that's
But
right.
just on the Greek side of things, there is obviously the story of Icarus that flew to the sun, apparently. Now, I don't know how much that is connected to the Hollow Earth. One of the guys, obviously, we've had a lot of people in the 1800s bringing it up to
Mm.
speed on
Yeah.
the American continent and in the Western world. So, who
There was,
the
yeah,
figures there? John Cleese Sims was a
yeah.
very interesting guy, wasn't he?
He was, and you also have the Navajo chieftain that was known as Ogier Basa Halani Maki Todicini.
Right.
And this individual had a huge amount of stories that he preserved in Navajo Indian mythology and Navajo Indian folklore in regards to the Hollow Earth and the various occupants that had obviously in shall we say prehistory visited the surface of the United States of America and Canada, and many of his genetic ancestors had encountered. So I think it was when I did the research in this Navajo chieftain called Ogier Bisahalani Maki Todicini. It was very interesting that so much of his information hasn't really garnered any real public attention. But again, he's a voice, like so many different Native American chieftains in the last 150, 200 years, who are just seen as whimsical individuals with fantastical stories and of no relevance. And that's really
Totally
sad
dismissed, and
because
yet they were chiefs of major tribes and
mm,
major shaman, respected
yeah,
people, great
oh,
knowledge,
revered
and
and
yet they
well
were just
respected.
thrown. Yeah,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
This gentleman, this Navajo chieftain called Ogier Bisahalani Maki Todicini, apparently encountered inhabitants from the Hollow Earth. We can describe them as Nordic Aryans. He described them as being the members of the true White Brotherhood from these subterranean reaches.
Mm.
And this event or this occurrence apparently happened around the 14th of December, 1856 and
Wow.
lasted until, and I think roughly around the 20th of October 1857. So he had an encounter that lasted for a long period of time with these individuals who said they had come from the Hollow Earth. So again, I'm going to put this out there as just a postulated question. With the destruction of the civilization of Atlantis, would it have been the case that many of the these Nordic Atlanteans, as they were described as being some kind of Aryan people, did many of them actually descend into the Hollow Earth as a form of safety and sanctuary from this first great flood or the second great flood, and the huge amounts of sea quakes and earthquakes that would have resulted from the collapse of the Atlantean islands, and that were the remnants really at the very end of that civilization, and obviously all the coastal destruction that took place that is known about from the stories and the accounts of the Aztecs, the Inca, the Mayans, and the Toltecs in Latin America. So were these individuals the same individuals that had escaped the destruction of Atlantis that this Navajo chieftain had encountered? Just putting it out there as a postulated question.
Well, it makes sense. It's got me thinking of Mount Shasta then, and all the stories of Mount Shasta where the beings have met, and people have encountered all these beings around Mount Shasta. And there's
a very big convergence of geomagnetic ley lines there, and intersecting nodes or dimensional vortices. So people say, well, how could it be the case they can encounter individuals that may have come from Atlantis that are these Nordic Aryans or other maybe benevolent ultra terrestrials or extraterrestrials? Well, if it's some kind of trans-dimensional portal, or whatever's going on there, the laws of physics don't totally apply. We're not going to fully understand what's going on. But again, a lot of people say, "Oh, that's just information from shills. It's more disinformation, more diversion, and so on and so on." So it's immediately dismissed by large numbers of people when they hear those words mentioned in conjunction with Mount Shasta. So.
Well, the way people are programmed is they see a landscape, they'll see a desert. There's a desert, there's cactuses there, there's mountain range in the background. There you go. That's what it is. But actually, if you go one step beyond that and start looking beyond the physical perception of what you're seeing, you'll actually notice that there's an energetic structure to the world we live in. And that's kind of what the program that we are given is, that this is how we identify it. Look at how, when you're a child, this A for apple, B for book, it goes on and on. So you identify in this way, and this is the way the physical world's taught. I think
that's what a lot of what Western science is about, is creating an ongoing process of superficial thinking. So you're not supposed to really think about what the 4D holographic reality, the astral plane is. You're not really meant to postulate the idea that perhaps the aurora borealis or the North Dawn, as with the aurora australis or the South Dawn, are actually the electromagnetic emanations coming from the central sun in the golden paradise of the Hollow Earth. You're meant to believe only its interactions between the actual sunlight and the cosmic radiation from the solar system and deep space interacting with the atmosphere of planet Earth to create such effects. So everything is dismissed and sidelined. That is not going to fit the narrative that they want the general public to look at. You can look at the flat earth theory from the early medieval period that was, actually promoted by the Roman Catholic Church, and now is being reinvented and promoted as something that's actually authentic. We're not living apparently, according to the flat earth theorists, on a spherical or ovoid planet Earth. It's actually apparently flattish, or whatever that's supposed to mean. So it's another diversion.
Well, obviously, as well, just on that note, because a lot of people have them ideas and open to belief, whatever you feel is right for you.
That's right. They can believe whatever.
There is a lot of documentation historically, and very solid documentation, that states that we are not in that type of Earth. Now, we're not in a completely cylindrical round Earth, as we're told. Obviously, the blue pearl that you see from NASA, the image, is even told that image is not real. So for anyone that believes that real, that is not a real image. That is a fact. But I mean, we are not told the full depth about space. We are not told about what this planet is. There's a lot of questions exactly what we are living on. 100%. Understand that there is so many distortions that have been put in place that we don't actually know. But we do know, what we do know is what we're told about space isn't correct. What we're told about the way the world is constructed as a round circle isn't correct. There is something else, 100%. But that doesn't mean it's flat.
So when it comes to those individuals that we would possibly indirectly or directly defined as hollow earth theorists. There's so many people with credible backgrounds as well, such as Sir Isaac Newton, Captain John Cleave Sims Jr., Marshall Blutcher Gardner, and Raymond Arthur Palmer, who fully believed in the concept of a hollow earth, where there was some type of, inner space where there was a golden paradise, and the
Mm.
possibility of a central sun was given consideration.
That's
Additionally,
interesting, Isaac
yeah,
Newton, though. I mean,
yeah.
he's
Well,
and what
he was also a Western alchemist as well as
that's right.
a mainstream scientist, which is very, very
Mm.
interesting to consider and to note. And then you look at, for example, the health advocate from the United States of America, known as Walter Isidore Siegmeister. Most people know him as Raymond Walter Bernard. And then you have the devout American Christian and conspiracy theorist known as Alan Bruce Walton. And of course, that brings us on to Mr. Stephen Clark Curry, who was
Mm.
an avid traveler and an adventurer and hollow earth theorist. So
And
I
that
think, yeah,
so
we can talk
yeah,
about that.
introduce that. That would, just to say to people, absolutely mind blowing. That was back in 2004. That's actually pretty
Yeah.
much when I discovered the Hollow Earth. And Stephen was kind of looking at it as well. Stephen's really looked into it a lot further than I have. But it was so incredible at the time. It was around $20,000 that Steve Curry was organizing an expedition
That's
to
right.
the Hollow Earth. And tell us about that story, Steve, because it's quite fascinating. And you've looked into it in depth and find out more research, which is quite mind blowing, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't. A lot of people probably don't know much about Stephen Clark Curry and his avid fascination with the Hollow Earth. But what is known is that he came from Provo, which is located in Utah, in the western United States. And from his home in that city, he very much focused on his research into planning a trip to the Arctic North Polar region. And he was so interested in the idea and excited that planet Earth was really a hollow Earth, and there was this golden paradise, and he so much and so dearly and passionately wanted to reach the Arctic North Polar region and find that entrance into the hollow Earth. And so, yeah,
So
so
just
he,
before you go down there, just explain that he'd done a lot of expeditions worldwide previous to this as
yes, he
well.
had.
So
That's
he
right.
was a
Yeah,
massive explorer. This guy was
yeah,
very experienced in his field of research and
that's
what
right.
he
Yeah,
looked into. He was a very intelligent guy as well, I believe.
yeah. The Hollow Earth expedition, which was apparently going to take place at the Arctic North Polar region, was supposed to have started on the 14th of June 2003. And obviously, he founded what was known as the Expedition Company with a capital E, capital C, from his own city and residence, as I said, in Provo, in the Wasatch Front of Utah County in northern Utah.
Right.
And he put this together as a expedition that he named Voyage to Our Hollow Earth Expedition. And
Mm.
he wanted, as you said, people to pay a set amount of money to be part of the actual expedition team that would then hopefully find the entrance into the Hollow Earth at the Arctic North Polar region. So, unfortunately, Stephen Clark Curry, he passed away on the 18th of May 2006, only around 3 months before the actual initial overflight was supposed to take place to the Arctic continent,
Yeah.
which should have started on the 21st of August 2006. And unfortunately, they had to refund all those that were going to become participants. And the expedition company was kind of wound up, and that was it. It's a real
Mm.
shame because who
Mm.
knows what that Steve Clark Curry and so many other individuals that would have accompanied him, what they may have discovered there. It would have been quite exciting, but it
Now,
never happened.
like with Steve Clark Curry, I never realized the depth of knowledge he actually knew about the Hollow Earth. And obviously, when I was
Yeah,
looking at that information on the Hollow Earth and the expedition, I did not realize his depth of
yeah,
insight. But he actually had plans
yeah,
of the Kriegsmarine, which was the
yeah,
World War II National Socialist submarine that actually had plans to find ways to get into this
yeah.
Hollow Earth, wasn't it?
Mhm.
And this again, this is information that's out on the internet, so you make up your own mind and what this is. But I found that really interesting. I did not know about that information.
Yeah.
And so Steve Curry obviously would have been quite you know, up again. He must have known somewhere in himself that what he was dealing with was quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And even doing that expedition would have probably been quite, worrying for him. Like, I mean, I don't know. But what's your thoughts on it? You've researched that part, so you tell
Yeah.
me. What
Well,
do you think?
Stephen Clark Curry, he apparently received a letter from a colleague of his. Now, I don't want to get into the intricate details about his colleague because it's a lot of information, a lot of background to it. Obviously, there's a time constraint with what we're doing on this Sacred Wisdom podcast. So, but he actually received a letter or a copy of a letter that had originated from what we can class as an officer candidate. I won't go into the Deutschsprach or the German language translations on it, but he had worked for the Kriegsmarine or Warfare Navy. And the
Mm,
individual concerned, this officer candidate, was known as Karl Unger.
mm,
And he held the rank also of upper ensign and or past midshipman in the Third Reich in this Kriegsmarine or Warfare Navy, and he was on board a what was known as undersea boat or submarine or U-209.
right.
And he apparently entered the Hollow Earth on the 16th of April 1947. So I find that very interesting. This was all obviously listed in this letter. The actual commandant who supervised Karl Unger was known as Heinrich Broder. They apparently had managed to enter some vast expanse of water, an aquatic environment that we could, I suppose, coin or phrase as a hollow earth ocean. And he had sent this letter because he was so overwhelmed with joy that
Mm,
the efforts of the Kriegsmarine or the Warfare Navy of the Third Reich had managed to actually locate a real accessible expanse of the hollow earth through their efforts.
amazing.
So, and Stephen Clark Curry was fully aware of all of this, and
Mm,
perhaps that letter acted as a form of motivation for in the expedition company to get to the Arctic North Polar region, find an entrance into the Hollow Earth. And
but
we
it just,
also have to remember the travels of Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn
of
Byrd
course. I mean that.
and his
Yeah.
expedition up to the Arctic North Polar region and what he encountered there, which we don't really need to go into now because we've talked extensively about it
No,
before.
there's loads of that on the channel. You can see that on the other podcast.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's unbelievable, Steve. It's there's all these stories surrounding this, and yeah, and then we're pulled into all these other ideas and things of, it saddens me a lot. I know it saddens you, like looking at the world, the way it's all this kept, this secrecy, it's on and on and on. And
mm,
we are at that exploding point now, aren't we? So
we are.
we have to change. It really is. There's no other way. It has to change. We're not saying this information has to be the information that changes you, but surely from looking at this, anybody in a point of authority or in a position of power, you know, they should look at this. They should understand this information and know and not keep it from people, because in the long term, restricting that is actually going to be self-inflicting on them, and actually karmically will come back onto them. So, it's better to be open and free and spread information and, let people know about things. Mind blowing with Steve Curry. Really I really, that bit of research you've looked into is really mind blowing. I was never aware of that. He knew about the Third Reich and all that stuff as well.
I think there's many other accounts going back in the United States of America and in Canada, especially after World War II ended on the 8th of May 1945. Suddenly there was this plethora of discoveries of, prehistoric or highly archaic entrances into much deeper passageways or cavernous geological openings below the surface of the North American continent. And one is a story regarding an individual who was a municipal water director called Bentley Jonathan Parker. Now, on the 15th of October, 1963, whilst he was employed by the LA City Water Company, which at the time was part of the California Natural Resources Agency, or the CNRA, he actually discovered numerous artificially carved passages in one of the districts of Los Angeles. And these were dated back, sorry, to the antediluvian period. So we're going back into the Upper
Wow.
Paleolithic, and these were found to be artificially carved out subterranean passages underneath that part of Southern California. So if you have a municipal water director, such as this individual, Bentley Jonathan Parker, who worked for the LA City Water Company, can discover such things, as with so many of the Native American tribes, as we were specifically talking about earlier on in the Sacred Wisdom podcast, the Navajo Indians, the Paiute Indians, and all the research that Stephen Clark Curry did while he was alive. And these are just tiny fragments of information. That these are only just literally
Well,
a
I mean,
handful of stories and accounts.
and you only have to then look at the
Disconnect.
US Navy officer Admiral Byrd, who flew there, north and south over 9 times, I believe. So I mean,
He was an expert explorer. He really
Yeah.
was. Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd of the US Navy was an absolutely incredible individual, a fascinating man. And I suppose in many ways he could be seen as a national hero of the United States of America, going, I suppose, in the post-World War II period, especially. His accounts are fascinating, and you actually read many of his books and his, when he's talking about his explorations, his excursions in the Antarctic South Polar region. And I think he was a very enigmatic, a very unusual and quite unique individual.
And I think we have to remember one thing he said in his interview is not the fear and attack from other countries. The thing we should be concerned about is the fear of attack from the North and South Poles. And
so when he said that, when Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd said that, again, this is a speculative question, but what was he really referring to? Was he referring to the fact that there were vast silver fleets of flying discs piloted by either the Fourth Reich or perhaps Nordic Aryans that were from the Pleiades or some other part of the Milky Way galaxy? Again, I'm just putting it out there as a question.
very possible.
And he was concerned that they had such advanced occult technology, they could fly from the Arctic North Polar region or the Antarctic South Polar region, overwhelm the militaries of planet Earth very quickly and take control if they wanted to. I think that's seemingly what he was kind of indirectly referring to. It's very unusual what he said.
Yeah, and there's so many unusual things that happen throughout his stories and his trips to the North and South Pole. And I advise everybody to look into Admiral Byrd and also the stories that Stephen spoke about, the American Indians and all these different tribes. And there are countless stories throughout all folklore, throughout the world about the Hollow Earth. So there is most definitely subterranean caverns of some nature under our planet. And we would be stupid to just ignore it. And you can, if that makes you feel better. But if we look at the world where we are today, repressing, hiding this information is doing no good for humanity. It's actually making us suffocate more and more. And, this is the reason why we're just presenting information so you can open up and make your own mind up. And we do have a chapter in our book on the Hollow Earth, which is available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. So thank you, Stephen. It's an amazing talk as always, and the knowledge you bring to the table is immense, and you open my mind up more and more the more we talk. So thank you, Stephen.
That's all right.
And it's bye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.